Welcome, everyone, to Star Trek Online. I am Takeshi Yamato, and I am joined by our host, the Housecoat Gamer.
Yo.
And 117 Jorn.
Yo.
Earlier, Ron and I handled this museum by ourselves, just as a sort of a practice.
A dry run, you could say.
Yes.
But now we're doing this.
Yeah.
Well, we're diving in.
Yes. And once again, we start with the original, where it all began. Uss Enterprise Ncc 1701.
It's play, Take.
The most celebrated starship of her time, the Constitution-class Enterprise had over 40 years of service to Starfleet. Most of that time, including her celebrated mission from 2265 to 2270, was under the command of James T. Kirk. Besides her initial mission goals of seeking out new life and new civilizations, the Enterprise assisted many in need throughout the galaxy, and defended the Federation from threats such as Khan Noonien Singh. In her final flight, she was commandeered from Starfleet by her most famous captain and crew before being destroyed over the Genesis planet. We all know the crew members: Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, Sulu, Uhura, and Chekhov. The Constitution class was the mainline cruiser for Starfleet during the 2240s through the 2290s. In the 2270s, it got an extensive refit, such that it looked like a completely different ship.
Though it was built over the bones of the previous vessel. As for production, Star Trek started production in 1964 with the first pilot, The Cage. That didn't exactly pan out with the people in charge of NBC at the time, so they had to retool it again for Where No Man Has Gone Before. Then, 50 years plus 2 days ago, as of the airing of this video, The Man Trap aired, though that isn't the actual pilot. Star Trek is responsible for many technologies that exist today. The cell phone, automatic doors like the ones you see in grocery stores. Some technologies that TOS didn't even pioneer. Some that were later seen in DS9, for example. In a nutshell, much of the stuff we have today wouldn't exist without Trek. Any thought? Anything you want to share, Jorn?
I mean, yeah, like Ron said it best. Like Star Trek was such an inspiration for so many that all those things that we used to, that back then people thought there's no way that could be real. Like now, like we said, we have these doors, we have automated doors, we have cell phones, and one of the things that I would like to say is that people used to say that we're really never have replicators. Well, we have 3D printers now, which are kind of the same thing. So literally, like bit by bit, we're slowly reaching to the point where that Star Trek future may become a reality sooner rather than later.
And that's a future that I'd love to see. Of course, 20 years later, someone had to take over the reins, and that was taken over by
The USS Enterprise Ncc 1701D.
Let's
100
make sure
years
history
later.
never forgets the name Enterprise.
Enterprise. The fifth starship to bear both the Enterprise name and her iconic 1701 registry, the Enterprise D is an iconic piece of Federation history. Led by the principles of Captain Jean-Luc Picard, this legendary vessel ventured into a galaxy much changed since the original Ncc 1701 had gone on her 5-year mission. During her time among the stars, the Enterprise D was present and part of many major historical events, including the first encounters with both the Q Continuum and the Borg. Without the dedication of her brave crew, many more lives would likely have been lost in those incidents. Notable crew members: Captain Jean-Luc Picard, William Riker, Beverly Crusher, Worf, Data, Geordie LaForge, Deanna Troi, Wesley Crusher, Catherine Pulaski, and Tasha Yar. The Galaxy class was first launched in 2359, with the Enterprise D following up 4 years later in 2363. The Galaxy class has many innovations, including the fact that, including the ability to saucer separate, and it was the first starship to carry actual families. Because
long-range duration missions.
Yep. And the D served well. Until the Duras horrors killed it over Viridian 3.
Production-wise, the D was killed because of movie-quality HD cameras, at least for the 90s. As for production, if TOS and the first 4 movies made Trek a cult classic, this more or less made it mainstream. You weren't a sci-fi fan if you weren't a Trekkie. It was the thing that broke the bubble. Unfortunately, the D would not survive due to its, it was designed for TV cameras, not movie cameras, which is why they had to scrap it. Of course, I reasoned that thanks to hits from the deflector, it fried the generators, they couldn't remodulate, so the Duras sisters could just keep hitting it, and hitting it, and hitting it, until it exploded. But TNG wasn't the only one. During its 6th season, DS9 launched, and its 3rd season had this thing.
We are exploring.
The USS Defiant NX-74205.
And Jorn it wouldn't be one of our vids if something like this didn't happen.
We are explorers.
Yep.
We explore our lives, day by day. And we explore the galaxy, trying to expand the boundaries of our knowledge. And that is why I am here. Not to conquer you with weapons, or with ideas.
The Defiant class project was begun in 2366 as a response to the increased Borg threat to the Federation. This tough little ship was Starfleet's first real attempt at a warship, with almost no scientific equipment on board. Unfortunately, ultimately she did not pass her trials, and the project was put on hold until Commander Benjamin Sisko, a member of the Defiant team, asked for her to be assigned to Deep Space Nine to hold off the threat of the Dominion.
May I interject?
Sharp.
The reason for this? The ship nearly tried to blow itself up. Now, I get it. It was a prototype. But the warp core for this vessel was for a ship 4 times its size. That is like strapping a V12 engine to a go-kart, which is effectively what they did.
And then they strapped 2 M134D Gatling guns and a missile launcher to it as well. That didn't help things.
Yeah, it took someone from the Enterprise to fix all these problems.
Yep. From there, she served with distinction in the Dominion War and remained in service until her destruction in 2375. The USS Sao Paulo was assigned to Deep Space Nine and renamed the Defiant in her honor. Notable crew members: Benjamin Sisko, Jadzia Dax, Esri Dax, Worf, Julian Bashir, Miles O'Brien, Kira Nerys, Nog. Honorary crew members Odo, Quark, and Jake Sisko. As Ron said, the Defiant was overpowered and overgunned and tore itself apart, and it took Miles O'Brien, formerly an engineer of the Enterprise, to fix all the issues. Fix them he did, and the Defiant worked exceedingly well, even entering limited production. And future iterations of the ship further solved more problems until in the late 2400s, the Sao Paulo class is the definitive production model. The only weakness is still its small size, which means while it's a tough little ship, it can't quite handle the punishment some of the larger ships can. But that's not saying much. It's still tough, and it still packs quite a punch. A blade of armor, the phaser cannons, the quantum torpedoes. This thing was built to deal damage and
avoid taking it.
Yeah.
It is a small vessel. As for production, this was more or less meant to be the more deconstructive analysis of Star Trek. It looked at the concepts of the Federation, of people viewing the Federation from an outside lens. It talked about religion. It went about a myth arc, which started with Sisko discovering the wormhole, and ended with him pretty much accepting what he was. In fact, there was kind of a dueling franchises thing there. DS9 for Viacom, CBS, and Paramount, and Babylon 5 for Warner Brothers. They even introduced their own cool starship in the 3rd season, and Jorn just left again.
Shut up.
He's still listening.
Don't worry.
I'm still here, I'm just waiting for it to a point where I can talk again.
The White Star for B5. Any memories you want to share with us about DS9, Jorn?
I'll be honest, I've never really been able to actually see DS9 from beginning to... Oh, shut up. I wasn't able to watch DS9 from beginning to end because, it wasn't quite in my age group, but, I have been actually trying to binge watch it for the last few weeks, and it really is it's like as Ron says, it's a successful deconstruction of the Federation, because, sure, the Federation is this idealistic future of what we could be, but the DS9 helps elaborate the sacrifices that need to be made in order to achieve that utopian vision of the Federation, and the things that needed to be done, all those little behind the scenes things, and
like Section 31.
Especially Section 31.
No one likes them, but we know they're necessary.
Yes.
Just like the CIA, at least that's how it's supposed to be.
Except a hell of a lot more secretive. We'll talk about that when we get to STD. But of course, during Season 3 of DS9 came the 4th vessel of the TNG era, USS Voyager.
Ncc 74656.
In a region where shifting allegiances are commonplace, we have to have something stable to rely on. And we do. The principles and ideals of the Federation.
The USS Voyager holds the distinction of the starship that explored the most unknown space during the course of her voyage, although this was not her intended mission. During a mission to secure the Maquis terrorists on board the Valjean, the ship encountered a being known as the Caretaker and was thrust 70,000 light-years into the Delta Quadrant. For 7 years, under the more than capable command of Catherine Janeway, the crew searched for a way to return to the Alpha Quadrant and their loved ones, finally succeeding in 2378. The scientific and anthropological data brought back from her voyage was instrumental to the Federation's understanding of the varied species and locales of the Delta Quadrant, knowledge that is still referenced to this day. Notable crew members include Catherine Janeway, Tuvok, Chakotay, Harry Kim, Tom Paris, 7 of 9, Baelana Torres, the Doctor, Helix, and Kess. The Intrepid class was born of environmental concerns.
Or at least partially redesigned because of environmental concerns.
Yes. Because studies and a strong example had shown that that use of warp drive use of warp drive at high speeds damaged the barriers between subspace and real space. And as such, the variable geometry warp nacelles were a way to help fix that. Oh no.
It wouldn't be us if this didn't happen.
Yes, fair enough.
I mean, it happens.
Yes.
Oh God.
We shall resume when Shorn gets back, people.
Please stand by.
The variable geometry warp nacelles were a way to streamline the warp field to make it less damaging to subspace. And the Intrepid class had many other innovations as well, such as the bioneural gel packs that served as its computer systems and worked to replace the isolinear technology that had been in use previous, which in turn had replaced the duotronic computer systems of the original series.
May I interject?
Yes?
It has also been stated that these bioneural systems were experimental, which is why they were so temperamental in series. In fact, Voyager might have been the actual first to test them in the field, which explains why they're so, shall we say, iffy.
Yes.
They had to use isolinear because they just kept failing. Again, experimental technology, 50,000 light years from home, you do the math.
Yeah. What didn't fail for them, however, well, maybe not right away. Well, it took some effort, but it still worked, was the Emergency Medical Holographic Program, or EMH. Meant to serve as an extra doctor in the case of emergency situations, the Voyager, in its trip to the Delta Quadrant, lost its entire medical staff, leaving the EMH as the only doctor on the ship. Tom Paris, primarily their pilot, and one of the best pilots in Star Trek, was the one served as an emergency medic, and Cass, a local from the Delta Quadrant, trained in as a nurse. But the EMH, the doctor, was still their main medical personnel. And speaking of Tom Paris, he had some good engineering qualities in addition to being a skilled pilot. He designed the Delta Flyer, for crying out loud.
A shuttlecraft which while two-thirds the size of a Danube, may have arguably been more effective than the Danube. Was certainly more heavily armed and augmented with Borg technology thanks to 7 of 9.
Yes, and Baelana Torres, Tom Paris was honestly my favorite character in Voyager, especially his romance with Baelana. Other characters, I liked 7 as well, but other characters, not quite so much. Janeway was the weakest of the 5 core captains. I've always called her just Janeway, until Ron corrected me in our previous video about her being the most scientific-minded of the group, of the 5.
If it was possible, every time there was something scientific, science boner.
Yes. But yes, she was still the weakest of the 5. And there were other issues as well, but I will let Ron deal with those.
Voyager had the unfortunate timing to merge during the time of emerging internet. The internet basically came to be when Voyager launched. Bulletin boards, and of course he just... not again. Not to mention certain people lied about their qualifications.
Yes.
Then there were the continuity errors. Those would have been easily passed over in TNG, but with the internet, people started noticing them and started pointing them out.
Yes. such as the definitive Voyager torpedo inventory log, with background music as the Ken Ken.
That could have easily been solved with a, hey, we need to mine material for more torpedoes. Let's make that a subplot of an episode, huh?
Yeah.
Anything you want to share about Voyager, Jorn?
Personally, I can't really add that much to Voyager because I never was able to watch the series from beginning to end. I've seen a few episodes here and there, and overall, I couldn't really see many problems with Voyager when I first viewed it. It wasn't until, as you guys said, that you see the internet, and the internet has a habit of compiling a lot of data. And when you compile all that data, you start noticing little plot holes that they never really explained, and it never really do that much to explain. So, overall, I can't really say that much about Voyager, but all I know is that it was a flawed gem, and some of the actors have controversial viewpoints IRL, but I'm not gonna say anything about that, at least not for Voyager.
It was wiser not to mention anything political about those guys.
Yeah.
Of course, now we move on.
I'm saving that one, though.
The Enterprise E.
Yes. The sixth ship, well, or seventh, depending on what you consider, to bear the name.
Sixth to bear the Ncc 1701 designation.
Yes. Seventh to bear the name overall. After the destruction of the Enterprise D in 2371, this Sovereign class vessel was rechristened in her honor and launched as the Enterprise E. The crew of the previous Enterprise was transferred over mostly intact and continued to serve under the command of Jean-Luc Picard, sleeker and arguably more powerful than her predecessor. The Enterprise E served with distinction in several major Starfleet crises, including the Borg invasion of Earth's past, conflict with the Sona, and the battle with the Romulan Shinzon. Notable crew members, essentially the same as the crew of the D, except Wesley, Pulaski, and Yar didn't make it over, for varying reasons. Anyway, the Sovereign class was the most conventional anti-Borg experimental design.
The other two, of course, being the Prometheus, my apologies, which was basically saucer separation taken to the nth degree. Of course, that complication kept it from entering service until the Dominion War. The other one, well, that was 2 ships ago.
Yeah, that was the Defiant, and we already covered that. The Enterprise E basically took everything about classic Starship design and just made it better. And the Sovereign class. And it carried many innovations from previous ship designs. It had ablative armor from the Defiant and quantum torpedoes from the Defiant. It had binaural gel packs from Voyager. And it had the emergency medical holographic program, though it only showed up in First Contact because Beverly Crusher did not like using it. Anyway, this thing did serve... it has more power than anything than the Galaxy class, more firepower, it is faster. It is just overall an improvement, and it served with distinction, even if some of its missions were a bit controversial. Shit on.
Look at the Space Beast.
Yeah, but it served with distinction, and the Sovereign class itself continues to serve with distinction all the way up to today.
The E was born out of necessity for Trek because, as stated before, the Galaxy class shooting model wasn't made for the high definition cameras. The sets weren't made for the high definition cameras. It's why all of the scenes aboard the D were so dark. The E, on the other hand, was pretty much designed from the ground up as a movie ship. As for the problems, well, again, these movies were made during DS9's run, with the exception of Nemesis. Insurrection was meant to tie into DS9 in a way, shortly before Season 7, I believe. As for, well, Nemesis, I can't exactly say that was the strongest movie, but at least it wasn't 2009. Any thoughts on First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis, Jorn?
First Contact was actually I believe, if I remember correctly, it was one of the first Star Trek movies I watched when I was a kid, and honestly, like I really do like this design of the Enterprise E. It's just it's like as Takeshi mentioned, it's a culmination of like all that came before to design this very sexy and curvy design that is the Enterprise E, that sort of like goes on in like future iterations like the Enterprise F, which we will get to later. And like it's a solid design, and even in our own stories that we like to write about it, like we still tend to try to use it because we just love that ship so much. And of course, then we got this one.
This is when you have someone used to action movies making a Star Trek movie.
Yes, the Kelvin timeline version of the USS Enterprise Ncc 1701.
Your father was captain of a starship for 12 minutes.
He saved 800 lives, including your mother's and yours.
I dare you to do better.
The ship you are viewing is a replica of a ship from an alternate universe. During the destruction of Romulus, Ambassador Spock and a Romulan terrorist known as Nero were pulled into a black hole and transferred back in time to 2233. Nero's ship, the Narada, engaged with the USS Kelvin, creating a branching timeline that resulted in many changes from the history we know. Knowledge of this universe, including this alternate version of the historic Enterprise, was gained during the Sphere Builder incident in 2410. Notable crew members are the same as the original Enterprise, but they also included an android known as 0718. This thing is... it's a hot rod.
They mixed a hot rod with a Connie, and it does not work.
I mean, it's not that it doesn't work. It's probably that it's just a wrong time period. Because the best way to...
I did point this out in earlier vids. This ship would fit very perfectly in the 31st century as a throwback design. We remember the Connie, but we're gonna need to make it bigger, use some modern technology. Oh, this works. And even in STD, we do see that sort of whole styling for Season 3.
Yes. Yes.
Like, overall, like, Star Trek 2009 is actually, it was actually like the first Star Trek movie I actually watched in the big screens, and like I didn't really have that negative of an impression on it, because like, oh, it's actually very, because like when I saw it, I was like, oh, it's very actiony, it's like Star Wars, like, and I liked it at first, but it wasn't until like years later that I thought like, yeah, it's trying too hard to be like Star Wars. And Star Trek, well, it does, you can see some Star Wars inspiration every now and then, but for the most part, like Star Wars and Star Trek don't really mix all that well, because one is more about science and exploration, and the other one's more about, you know, war. So
yeah,
War, mysticism, politics.
Yeah. Jar Jar Abrams took Star Trek and he turned it into Lens Flare Incorporated presents Stuff Blowing Up and Stuff in Space, the trilogy.
I wouldn't be all that too bad to offset about it if they just like made it so, like, it wasn't the Enterprise, and that it was just... Like,
or they could have said it was in the future. The 26th century.
Either in the future, or they could have set it up like make it so like it's a completely new ship with a new crew that's not the Enterprise, and like say like, oh, these guys are doing this here, because as we all know from like Deep Space Nine and Voyager, like Star Trek, while the Enterprise series does play a critical role, it's not the be all end all. Like there are other ships, there are other stories to be told other than just that of the Enterprise.
Yes.
And sometimes they can interconnect.
Yes.
But then we go to the beginning.
Speaking of, yes.
Yeah, the biggest problem I would say is that like I think part of the reason that they had to redesign it is most because like I believe around this time the rights for Star Trek were divided, so they couldn't really use the right design, so they were kind of back into a corner, but they didn't really help themselves. Next ship, on the other hand.
Yes. The Nx01 Enterprise, the first exploratory starship
but I won't
from
leave anyone
Earth.
behind. Not if I can help it.
It's been a long
I can't try to save humanity without holding on to what makes me human.
Oh, yours talking?
It's been a long time.
Oh God, no.
Why
is that song catchy?
In 2151, before the Federation
Could you please stop,
had formed, the first Starfleet ship to bear the name Enterprise was launched. She was the first ship capable of going Warp 5, a huge leap forward technologically. This experimental new ship was meant to be on a test run, until an encounter with a Klingon changed everything. Under the command of Jonathan Archer, she served with distinction until 2161, when she was retired with full honors. During her historic voyage in the stars, she was instrumental in protecting humanity from many threats, including the Xindi weapon. Notable crew members were Jonathan Archer, T'Pol, Charles Tucker III, Malcolm Reed, Travis Mayweather, Hoshi Sato, and Phlox. The NX-01 was, as stated, the first exploratory vessel of Starfleet. And in many ways, it was the defiant of its time. No, it didn't have a warp core designed for something much larger, but it was cutting-edge technology, and it pushed the boundaries of technology at the time. And as such, it had many teething problems. Not to mention it had to be launched in a hurry, and many systems weren't installed, such as the phase cannons, which had to be built in transit when they needed them.
Enterprise had a troubled production. The first 2 seasons, they were really trying to be Trek, unfortunately due to the fact that pre-production started before 9/11, and you know how that went. Then they had to retool for season 3, taking elements of post-9/11 society into account.
Yeah.
It wasn't until season 4 where they finally found their footing and started making the steps toward joining the Federation. Don't bother logging in, Jorn. Don't bother. Because if it keeps happening, you're just going to keep getting mad, and we don't want that.
I'm fine.
I just figured I'd suggest it. Season 4, they started going and exploring the origins of TOS. Why the Klingons had smooth foreheads. Why the Vulcans weren't acting like the Vulcans we knew. They were laying the foundation. And we were 1 episode from the start of the Earth-Romulan War. Then Les Moonves decided to cancel it. What about you, Jorn? Any thoughts on Enterprise before we move on to...
Enterprise was the first Star Trek series that I was able to watch, like, I was able to have a lot of memories of, because back when I was a kid and I was like still in like elementary school, going on to middle school, Enterprise was a show that I would watch every day before I went to school, along with another show called Liberty Kids, and I would watch the heck out of it because like it was a nice show, like seeing the backgrounds, like how the Starfleet got its origins, and And I definitely did like a lot of the characters. It was nice, fun show, and I really did like the design of the Enterprise. It was like such a unique looking ship, and Enterprise was, and this show is like what helped me get really attached to Star Trek as a whole. The series holds a very special place in my heart. Unlike this next ship.
Yes, here we come to the dumpster fire of Star Trek, the USS Discovery Ncc 1031.
The only way to defeat fear is to tell it no. No.
I got a few rants.
We
about
will
this
not
one.
take shortcuts.
Oh God.
Righteousness. No.
Like I'll let
We will
Ron go
not
first,
break
but like
the
I gotta
rules that
point out
protect us from
something.
our basest instincts. No. We will not allow desperation to destroy moral authority.
With her exploits only With her exploits only recently rediscovered after years of the highest classification, the USS Discovery is an important part of Federation history that we are only just learning about. It was discovered that one of her captains, Gabriel Lorca, had been replaced by his counterpart from the Mirror Universe during the Prior's World incident. After his removal from command, the Discovery was instrumental in ending the First Federation Klingon War and in stopping the threat of the rogue AI known as Control. The ship then disappeared into the far future, where all of her recorded history has been lost, or rather, hasn't happened. Yet. Notable crew members were Gabriel Lorca, Saru, Michael Burnham, bitch, Paul Stamets, Ellen Landry, Ash Tyler, Hugh Culber, Sylvia Tilly, Iram, Jet Reno, Philippa Giorgio, Christopher Pike, and Spock.
His name's Fork.
This bloody thing, it only barely looks like a Starfleet vessel. The pylons are all wrong. The saucer, that cutout just isn't practical. And don't get me started on the special systems. If I weren't allowed to get into the spore drive, we would be here for hours.
And we don't have hours. As for the design of this thing was designed by the man who basically created the look of Star Wars, Ralph McQuarrie, for Planet of Titans, an unproduced Star Trek series. It's a perversion of his work, and I hate it. And I hate Alex Kurtzman for allowing it to happen.
Okay,
it makes Section 31 a public knowledge when, even if it was classified, there would still be rumors in the 21st century.
Yeah, and
the Klingon
when
War,
first mentioned...
They went on Earth's doorstep. Martok outright said, they never got close. The continuity errors are beyond madness.
Yes.
You may go.
Continuity errors aren't the only problem with Star Trek Discovery and all this.
Oh yeah, the characters are very flat. The plot sucks.
The characters are not only flat, like it all revolves around this stupid Mary Sue that I'm calling Mikey Spock, because that's basically what she is. She's just this superior version of Spock. Like she's a human, yet she just could think like a Vulcan, and she could do the Vulcan neck pinch, despite only Vulcans be able to do that because they have the physical strength to pull that off. Mikey Spock is the most overpowered and most stupid character in Star Trek history, and
that's saying a lot.
I'm going to tell you guys, tell everyone here who's viewing this video, a very uncomfortable truth as to why this show sucks so much. This show sucks so much because everyone that was making this movie was going with because when this series was made, this was all during the whole Trump administration. We all know that, and people were so scared of Trump, like, oh, he's Orange Man, and like they had to put everything in their shows. They had to make they had to have all these innuendos, like, oh, this is immigration stuff, oh, immigrants, oh, we gotta remember Trump, and like what really ruined SD, aside from all the Mary Sues, was they got political in a real world sense. And sure, Star Trek has talked about politics before. I'm well aware of that. Deep Space Nine handled it well. Voyager handled it well. All the past iterations of Star Trek have handled politics fairly well. But Star Trek Discovery was so on the fucking nose when it came to politics that you just could not enjoy at all. And even then, that combined with all the other missteps, it just caused the whole thing to fall flat.
They had to retool it 3 times, and it's fallen on its face. And that's why we hate it. Fortunately, well, Jorn, you have a vessel akin to this.
Yes. Next up is the Discovery version of the Ncc 1701, also meant for a show called Strange New Worlds, which hasn't aired yet.
Honestly, the only good thing that came out of Discovery, in my opinion.
Amen to that. We won't even bother reading the intro.
Yes.
It is an inbred abomination. It takes elements of the Phase 2 Enterprise, the TMP Enterprise, and the Cage version of the TOS Enterprise, and mixes them all together in a design that's 25% larger than the one we saw before. They're not the same ship. You can't just refit a Yorktown class carrier into a Nimitz. They are fundamentally different. You can't just build... You can't turn this into a smaller Connie. You can't turn the smaller Connie into this. Doesn't work. That said, Anson Mount is an excellent successor to Jeff Hunter, the original man who played Pike, and, in effect, the man who gave STD its 3rd season. I will give them credit for this. They picked the right Pike.
Overall, I really don't have that many complaints about this ship in particular, because, honestly, this comes from an idea that I came up for a story for Star Trek I came up with that involved a...
Carrier Connie.
Yeah, a carrier, because the big thing that I actually like about the ship is that's a Constitution class that also functions as a carrier, and while Ron may criticize this, I think Star Trek is very lacking when it comes to things like starfighter carriers and things like that.
Well, it doesn't really revolve around that. That's Star Wars' thing.
I know it doesn't revolve around that, and I know it sounds somewhat hypocritical, but when you have a giant Starfleet like this, small craft like fighters can perform a lot of more duties than just being around to shoot other things. I just like this ship, and
to be perfectly honest, the ship does fit the 25th century. It's another throwback design. And then we come to this.
Theirs not to make reply.
This is
theirs
our
not to reason
Enterprise.
why.
The Enterprise of Star
theirs
Trek
but
Online.
To do
the
and
Enterprise
die.
Ncc
Into the Valley of
1701
Death rode the 600.
If you thought the Sovereign was sexy, this gal's a bombshell.
Oh, how true. This ship, it has fought the Klingons. It has fought the Iconians. It has fought the Zenkethi, the Herc. It's fought in the Klingon Civil War.
It's fought the Romulans.
It's fought everything.
Yeah.
And she's only 2 years old.
Yup.
The ship was
originally an Odyssey-class vessel. Built in 2409 as a flagship design. It was meant to serve as command vessels. And it was the biggest ship in Starfleet history up to that point.
Just like every other ship that has borne the name Enterprise.
Yes.
You're seeing a pattern here.
Yes. The Enterprise F suffered incredible damage in the Battle of Earth at the end of the Iconian War, and required extensive repair and refit. Its sister ship, the USS Yorktown, also suffered damage, but much more. As such, it was rebuilt into a completely different ship design, the Yorktown class. And the decision was made to turn the Enterprise F into another Yorktown. It's sort of a similarity to the original Enterprise and the Enterprise A.
The Enterprise A used to be USS Yorktown, Ncc 1717. In fact,
Yes.
we helped save the Yorktown in our TOS recruits.
Yes.
So in a sense, we saved the Enterprise twice over.
Yes. Notable crew members for the Enterprise F include Captain Vakel Shawn, the first Andorian captain of an Enterprise, the first non-human captain of an Enterprise, as far as I know. Samuel Winters, Jarell Cav, Tem Inasi, Saville, Philippa Matthias, Kiona, and Kirayoshi O'Brien, the son of Miles O'Brien, who worked on DS9 and the Defiant, and served as transporter chief on the Enterprise for 5 years.
STO has had its many problems.
Yes.
It suffered in development hell for 7 years. Then Perpetual Entertainment and Cryptic brought this game out of hell, and well, we wouldn't be playing it if it wasn't successful.
Yeah.
In a sense, this is the ultimate successor to TNG. Perfectly fits in with the rest of the timeline. And as for the Enterprise F, I would have preferred her to stay in Audi, but I'm pretty sure there are people who would have preferred the original Enterprise to stay as she was in TMP, in TOS. But I can live with it, because the Enterprise is always changing.
Always evolving to match the time. As long as there's a ship called the Enterprise around, well,
there will always be
Trek.
Trek.
Be all right.
Yep.
And I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah.
I hope you enjoyed.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to end this.
Sorry.
I hope you enjoyed this tour through Star Trek history from
trip down memory lane.
From 1964 to 2009, when STO came out, obviously. We're trying not to count the last 2 vessels to show up. Farewell, gentlemen. Housecoat Gaming, signing off. You can sign off too, gentlemen.
Takeshi Yamato, signing off.
Adios, motherfuckers!